All right. Well, I appreciate you coming.
Of course, no doubt.
I know we've been trying to do this for a while. For those that don't know, you and I are going to um, work on our own podcast, but we've been needing to do a dry run. So I figured I'd have you come on this one and we can kind of get a flow for our vibe and also kind of figure some things out. So, for those that don't know you, your name is Kelsey Wilson. You are a financial enthusiast.
Financial enthusiast, yeah, definitely.
And you also started your own firm called Black Lines. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Black Lines is essentially a fiduciary financial firm. And for those that don't know what fiduciary means, it just basically means we put our clients' interests at the top no matter what. And we're legally bound to essentially do that at all times. So really putting our clients first, helping them with all aspects of their finances, whether it's investments, insurance, estate planning, retirement planning, as well as tax planning as well too. So that's pretty much what we do is we really help our clients in all kind of financial aspects and really take a fiduciary approach in that space.
What got you into that?
So what got me into that, I'd probably say a combination of both my mom and my dad. My mom, she's a teacher. So she's always taught her whole life. So just being able to see her teach and instill information to other individuals was always something that was important to me. So my mom on that standpoint, and then my dad, he was always in the space where he worked as an accountant. So finance was always kind of around in that space. So the combination of teaching, accounting, and financing there, the bridge between both of those, I would say, is likely what pushed me to the financial space, amongst a lot of other things. But
What was your actual pathway to get there? Like, 'cause there's one thing to have those influences when you're growing up and to say, I want to do this, but there's another thing to actually take those steps and actually to be where you are. So, what was the path that you took from there as a child to where you are now?
yeah, so as a child, I was always just good with money. So it was just always kind of like a natural gift.
Hmm.
And then from there, graduated from high school, college started to approach what am I going to do next. So I ended up going to college. I actually majored in business and business finance, where I kind of started my journey off there in the financial space. But when I even started in that, I didn't even really want to do business. I actually went to school to be a astronaut. I went to
Really
school, yeah, to be
crazy.
for astronomy. And then quickly realized like that just wasn't my path.
Right,
I'm
right.
always interested. I still am interested into astronomy and in space and NASA and all that there. But naturally, just my natural gift was finance.
Okay.
So then from there, I started to look into the business school. Well, I was deciding my major, ended up switching my majors, went to the business school, and then really focused on finance. Then from there, was able to get an internship my last year in college with a big financial firm and started working there and then kind of just continued on from there.
It's crazy because it's, I don't think many of us, especially like young black kids, are can ever really say we were good with money growing up. And I think a lot of that comes most things, it comes from like our parenting and just our environment and our programming. Um, and I think that's what makes what you do so dope is because there is I think a widespread lack of financial literacy um, in America in general, but I think especially amongst like us. Um, how does that kind of play into what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, it plays into it a lot just because I realized that, especially as I was going to school, even for me, my parents, educators, also on the accounting space, even for me, I was behind the ball in regards to financial literacy, and I didn't even realize it as far as from a household standpoint. So it plays into a big role because we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
So even from a standpoint, a lot of people think that they maybe have like high financial literacy or are financially literate. It's pretty to the point now where a lot of people can't pass a financial literacy test. So as far as like we think about like the U.S., like it's around 57% U.S. across that would actually pass a financial literacy test.
What does that consist of?
So that consists of questions like how much should you have in your saving? What percentage should you be
Mm.
saving? Um, if this happens, where should you be pulling money from? So just
It,
questions, yeah. That
question, is that test somewhere people can find like publicly available?
Yeah, there's multiple different ones. So yeah, if you go to Google and you type in financial literacy test, a whole bunch will pop up.
Because I didn't even know that existed. So like I know. I mean, I already figured I'd probably fail, but the fact that I didn't know that exists, that is crazy. So yeah, I have to get that link from you. We could probably link it under here when this goes up. But
For
yeah, that would be cool.
for
Go
sure.
ahead, though. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, for sure. And then also just with those like financial literacy tests, like it's just not taught in school. So those concepts that are core concepts to someone's survival and someone's success financially
Mhm.
is just not taught in school. So that's another big issue. And when it comes to like the US, 57%, and when it comes to African Americans, it's actually 38%.
Really?
So as far as percentage wise, we're significantly below the ball in regards to just financial literacy.
Mhm.
So it plays into my role, into what I do, pretty significantly. One, in the fact that as the U.S., everyone needs financial literacy. So in regards to the need, it's there significantly already amongst whites, blacks, Asians, Hispanics, all across the board. Financial literacy is huge, is
Mhm.
needed.
Mhm.
But for me, where it makes a big space is typically financial advisors. The majority of their clients look like them. Whether you're a white financial advisor, the
Right.
majority of your clients are going to be white. Whether
Right.
you're an Asian financial advisor, the majority of your clients are going to be Asian.
Right.
And for me being black, the majority of my clients are black.
Right.
So because of that, there is a larger gap than essentially my counterparts who are financial advisors that I have to kind of overcome and help
Mhm.
with. So there's a much statistically, there's a higher need for myself opposed to other
Right.
financial advisors, just because statistically, financial African Americans are behind the ball in regards to financial
Absolutely.
literacy. So that just creates a higher need for what I do in that space.
I feel like this conversation's been had so many times and everybody will have their own answers, but what are some of the, in your opinion, what are some of the biggest contributing factors for that being a bigger issue amongst us than other groups?
Just the lack of wealth to just begin with,
Mhm.
because when it comes to finance, it's one of the main things. One of the main things that you can't get help with it when you need it the most.
Right.
So for example, if you're sick and you go to the hospital and you're really, really sick, you can go to the hospital when you're like really, really sick. That's when most people go. You go to the doctor looked at you and said, hey, take this medicine, do this, do
Right.
this, do this. Everything's great. Um, when it comes to a trainer. If you weren't working with a trainer on try to get your health together, you gain some weight. You're like, okay, let me hire a trainer now. They get
Yep.
you right, et cetera, et cetera. All these different industries, all these different professionals, all these different spaces. For the most part, once things get kind of rough, you can kind of go talk to someone, and then you can kind of get together.
Okay.
Finance is one of the one things in my opinion that you can't do that with.
Okay.
Once you go from having finances and then you don't have any money and then you try to talk to a financial advisor, at that point in time there's not much a financial advisor can really do for you,
Okay. That
because
makes
there's
sense.
really no funds for them to say put it here, prepare for this, prepare for this. It's kind of already depleted.
Right. Right. Right.
So it's one of the one spaces where when people get down financially, when they try to talk to a financial advisor, it's like, I wish you would talk to me a couple months ago or before, that space. So
So before you go further, hold that thought. For somebody, because I know I've been in this situation, I was probably in this situation when I first met you, but for people that had the mindset like I had when I probably met you, that says, that's great, I understand, I appreciate it, and I even agree, but I don't feel like I have the money to do anything that you're going to tell me. Like, what would you say to them? Like, what would be your counter to that to say, to get them to come talk to you before they end up in that situation?
yeah, I mean, it's all relative.
Hmm.
So when it comes to just individuals, like if you talk to someone who's making $10,000 a year, and they're gonna say, you know what, I don't have the money to do anything. If you
Right.
talk to someone who's making $200,000 a year and they have expenses, they have kids, they have to take care of their parents, they have all these different things. A lot of people in their space would say, "Yeah, you're making $200,000 a year. you should be able to do things, but in their mind, they feel the same way as the person who makes $10,000 a
Right.
year. And I've worked with individuals who make $10,000 a year, put together a good saving plan, a good saving strategy, structure it out, and they're in a financially good space as far as what their lifestyle are, what they're doing. They might be in college or something like that nature, but so they're putting money in the right spots. They're setting up things so as their income continuously grows up,
Hmm.
they're going to be positioned. Versus that $200,000 person, they're already putting in bad habits, bad situations where financially on numbers they have enough money, but financially they're doing the wrong thing. So for someone who feels like they don't they don't have the means to do so,
Hmm.
it's really just kind of having that conversation on what am I doing to what can I do to change that,
Right.
and what does that look like? Because if you're feeling like, okay, things are tight, I don't have much money left over. It's okay. Well, let's kind of look and see what can we eliminate to save to be able to kind of create some of that flexibility in regards to finances.
Hmm.
So those are, I would say, for someone in that space, it's really just having that conversation, sitting down and saying, okay, why do I feel that way? Like I feel like I can't, like I'm not really, I don't have the money or the means to meet with a financial advisor. Asking yourself why that's the question, and then really kind of doubling down and thinking about if I did have the conversation, what would they probably tell me, and kind of thinking about that. And then when you actually have that conversation, then there's probably going to be things that you feel that you can't do that you can do.
Right.
There's probably going to be things that you don't realize, like, hey, I'm paying this much on this, but financially, I'm tight. Where if you kind of eliminate certain things, you'll be in a space where financially you'll be good. So it's really just figuring out what's the thing that's holding you back. And a lot of the times you need to go to the financial advisor or go to someone who's going to be able to identify what it is that's going to be holding you back,
Okay.
in that space.
I have I have a few questions. My first one, and I almost feel like I kind of know the answer, and it's probably going to be relative. But is there is there a minimum like dollar amount that you could tell like that somebody could invest, I guess, monthly that could make a difference in their life?
Yeah. So, I mean, the minimum amount is whatever you have. And that's when it comes down to this would take us to a rabbit hole more like the financial industry as a whole.
Right.
But as far as like a minimum amount, everything's relative. So if you're putting a percentage of your income away, then that percentage of your income is going to allow you to maintain your lifestyle long term. So whether you're putting 10% and if 10% of your income is $50 a month, then that's $50 a month. That will kind of continuously grow on that end. If your 10% of your income is more, then yeah, you just want to basically put that
Okay. So I
percentage
guess
away.
so to modify that question, is there a certain percentage that people should look to invest?
Yeah. So percentage wise, of forgetting about investing, percentage wise, individuals should be saving roughly around 20%
Okay.
of their income. Percentage of that, which should go towards um, your investing strategy, will basically be dependent upon other situations, like how much do you have in your emergency fund, how much are you saving towards retirement, what's your goals, what's your time horizon. So investing doesn't really isn't really necessary for everyone, but
Right.
everyone should be saving.
Okay. I saw, I think, a YouTube short, and this really ties into exactly what you're saying.
Hmm.
And I think it was somebody in the financial space, and they were speaking to like payday routines.
Hmm.
Let's say, hypothetically, um, somebody made $1,000, like their paycheck was $1,000 after taxes. What would you say their payday routine should be? Like, how should they divvy up that money?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the first thing is we have to start off of that person. So we have to basically build the avatar for what that person looks like. What is their goal? Are they someone who's like, you know what, I like working, I enjoy what I do, I want to work until I'm 70. Are
Right.
they someone who's like, you know what, I don't really like this job, I don't really like working, I want to be done with work at 50?
Okay.
Those two people are going to have a significantly different approach in what they're going to save that $1,000. I think it was said 1,000.
$1,000. Yeah.
Yeah, their approach is going to be significantly different.
That makes sense.
Someone who's in entertainment space who basically has a business and invests into equipment and things of that nature, like yourself. Yours is going to be completely different for someone who's basically working at a corporate role who doesn't really have any overhead expenses. Those
Right.
are going to be, so the first thing is we have to figure out the avatar for that person, what's important to them. And then generally that $1,000 will be broken down between one, their retirement. If they feel like they want to retire, work until 70, then we'll put some money away so that way they can get from 70 to 30, to 100 years old, so 30
Okay.
years. And then from there, figuring out what's their investments that they need to make. Sometimes for someone who has a business, it really doesn't make sense to invest into the stock market
Okay.
because their business, investing in their equipment, investing into the things that they buy, that is their investment.
Right.
So essentially investing in the business, having some of the money going towards that, and then having some money going towards emergency fund if they don't have enough inside of emergency, and then having some money going towards things that they're going to be purchasing 5, 10 years from now, and things of that nature. So it's impossible to say like a one size fits all for every single person because everyone's different.
I'm and I'm probably not asking the question correctly, but I'm thinking back to I think maybe it was like Total Money Makeover, and it was one of those things where I don't even know if the term is right, but discretionary income. But like if you have like just extra money set aside, there was like you put this much away for like you set this much away for like, hey, this is what you're going to go spend for the weekend to go out. This is how much you put to savings. This is how much you put to investing. I guess what I'm trying to think about is like if as just a normal person, regardless of what their career path or what their ultimate goals is, just certain times I think for me it's good to just have rules. So like for everything I do I try to set rules in place. So it's like if I had an extra $1,000, I would love to say, just to be in a point where subconsciously I say, okay, I need to put this 50% of this up for savings or whatever it is, 10 or 20% away for for what I'm going to do to go out, and then some other thing. So I guess, and I'm trying to figure out if there's somewhere along the lines of like that financial literacy test, if there are like some not concrete but like hard rules to say, hey, you should put generally around this percentage away for this, around this percentage away from that. I'm just wondering if there's anything like that out there.
Yeah, and a couple of things that, in regards to the question, a couple of things that I think is important just from the financial literacy standpoint, and then just from the psychology of money in just
Mhm.
general. One of the things you said a couple of times is if you have $1,000 extra every single month, um, a- I would say majority of people just psychologically it's really no extra,
Yeah, no, no,
and
no.
what I
And
mean
and
by,
and, and thousand was just a general number because
yeah,
not a lot of people have $1,000 extra.
yeah, and when
But even if it's like 100 or 50, it could be just we could say 100.
yeah.
But typically, yes, the way our mind works, I have that same problem. It's like, oh, I have this extra money, I could do this with it. And I think for me, that's why I'm asking that question, because for me, it's like, okay, I can buy this piece of gear, which is good right now because these are things that I actually need to invest in. But as soon as I turn that corner where I have like all of my base equipment, I know I need to have those like hard, fast rules that say, hey, or something to go off of to say, okay, now you have this extra money, just put this part aside like you never saw it, invest this into this, and then this portion you can invest into your gear. So those are the type of things I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, and then when it comes to that, I would say like that extra pot, that extra money, instead of like looking at it from like, okay, now that I have this extra money, where can I put it? It's better to look at like just your finances in totality.
Right.
So instead of looking at, okay, I have this pot of all my finances, and then from there, there's this extra portion here, and then how do I allocate that? A lot of the times that can create a lot of faulty planning for
Okay.
individuals because what happens is if this pot starts getting small, now you're only working with this pot
Okay.
in the overall totality. So what I recommend people do is just from the jump look at that overall totality.
Okay.
So when you're making X amount of money, where should I put this money in general?
Right.
How much of it should be going towards bills? How much of it should be going towards savings in general?
Mhm.
And then from there, because then when you start there, you're starting from a space of I'm not worried about how much extra I have left over. I'm now worried about what I need to do with my money in general. And
Right.
that's one of the first things I always recommend people go in with that mindset.
Okay.
But once you're there, there's a rule called like the 60-20-20 rule. So the 60-20-20 rule is 60% of your income should be going towards your fixed expenses, your household expenses, and taxes. So that's basically your rent, your car, things that you have to pay no matter what,
Right.
month to month to month to month.
Right.
60% of your income should be going there.
Okay.
Then from there, you have your 20%. So 20% of your income should be going towards your finances. So that should be your insurances, your investments, your savings, everything in regards to your financial planning.
Right.
And then that other 20% is your fun money. That's where you do whatever you want to do with it. Go trips, go travel, have fun. You can do with that 20% guilt free because you know you've already taken care of the other 20% in the finances. So that's essentially,
That's what I was trying to get to.
yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
Got it.
So
Got it.
so that's where you want to be, and a lot of the issue, and the reason why I kept kind of going back to talking about just the overall totality of the pot is if you're not looking at it from the 60-20-20 rule, what a lot of happens is that 60% turns into 80%. And then now I have 80% of the pot going towards my fixed expenses. And then now I'm spending 15% of my money on fun. And then I'm looking at this extra slither, that extra five, and saying, what should I do with this extra five?
Right.
Where what happens is if you kind of put yourself in a bad situation, because now you're thinking about how much that should be saving on the back end, where you really want to be thinking about it from the jump.
Okay. No, that makes sense. How much? I know we talked about this before, but along with financial literacy, especially being somewhere like coming from Nebraska, I see it even more out here. Being somewhere in LA, how much do you think the whole like just trying to keep up with the look and the image kind of plays into? I don't know if it's a lack of financial literacy, but at least like setbacks financially.
It's a lot. A big influence. Marketing is real. Like when you think about like the Super Bowl and how much those companies pay for a 15-second spot just on
Right.
TV, they're not paying millions of dollars. They're getting something out of it. So when it comes to like keeping up with the Joneses and keeping up with the marketing, all those different things, that's basically psychologically being baked into you that you should be buying this, especially when it comes to like your neighbor or someone who's your peer. You look at them and you say, they're able to buy this, and this. I should be able to buy this, and this as well.
Yeah.
So when it comes to that mindset psychologically, it makes a huge impact. And what happens is the the individual who's usually the one who's basically not living within their means is usually the loudest. And what I mean by that, they usually have the nicest car. They
Right.
usually have the nicest clothes. They usually have the nicest items. And the reason because they're spending their money. So they're being marketed as this is how you should be living.
Yep.
And if you're making the same amount as them and you looking at it, you're like, okay, we live in the same space. We kind of do around the same thing. They're doing this, so I should be able to do this. And then it just kind of continues that cycle where if you kind of look at it and you just stay within your means, you look at your budget, you look at your finances, and you stay within that space and you're able to just kind of focus, you can kind of lay that to the side and kind of block that out and be good. But it makes a big approach because also there's people who receive inheritances, there's people who have other forms
Absolutely.
of income that you don't really know their situation where if you're looking at it from the side, you feel like you can afford it, you might not be able to afford it. So keeping up with the Jones is a big thing that
Yeah.
drains pocketbooks.
It's funny, and this ties into a few different things. Like for me, I learned so two things, well, three things. So for me, my parents are older, so they my parents had me in their mid 40s. So I always say like I feel like I almost missed out on a generation's worth of growth because they were basically born in the 40s.
Hmm.
So they were, they're boomers, but they were also the first to like attain a lot of things. They might have been the first to go to college, the first to get a really, really good job. So for them, coming from that time, it was the first time you were able to show any signs of wealth. And there definitely wasn't any financial literacy in that time. So for me, also coming from somewhere where it was a lot, where the cost of living was a lot lower, it was a lot more common, though it's relative. It was a lot more common to like to show off and have a little more in, I guess, in respects to your means. Um, But I know I fell into that trap when I came out here. I was like, okay, now I'm out in LA. Everybody has these real nice cars. So it's like, okay, it's all right to have a nice car in Omaha, but now in LA, I got to have an even nicer car. And then it's like, okay, everybody's doing these things. And then you start out literally all the things you said, like I've done that. So it's funny because now I look at things the other way because I also, being from Omaha, Nebraska, I've seen Warren Buffett many a times. He dresses normal. He has a regular old car. He lives in a semi-normal neighborhood, though I think he has a guardhouse at the front of it. But still, like you see people. I mean, we're like top 10, or we were at one point in time top 10 in billionaires per capita per 100,000 people, just because of Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, Fortune 500 companies. So it's crazy to see how people with money back in somewhere like the Midwest will carry themselves, and then how people with or without money out here carry themselves. And it really speaks to what you're saying. And I think a lot of it it comes down to, like you said, how we're marketed to, and how we feel like we need to keep up that image to kind of keep up with the Joneses.
Hmm. Yeah, and then also, yeah, just in being in LA, you feel like you need to flaunt money to make money.
Yes.
It's another marketing play, fake it till you make it type of thing that they say.
Especially since the industry is so much entertainment based.
Exactly. So entertainment based, it's all around, and it's really it's something that I don't take faults to anyone of doing it, because the forces around you are so strong that naturally you're going to do it. You have to basically make a conscious effort to check yourself. Like,
Hmm.
all right, like I'm not gonna do that. Like I have to do it myself sometimes as well. Like you feel the pressure of like, okay, well I'm doing this. This is going well. I need a nicer car,
Right.
or I need to buy this. It's very, very natural. It's unnatural to pretty much do the opposite and say, okay, let me take a pause. Do I really need this? Let me go pull up the spreadsheet. Let me break things down.
Right.
No, I don't need to buy that. The To have the success, that's when you have to do the unnatural. Whereas naturally, if things are going well, you're gonna
You
go
know,
buy the
treat
car.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not anyone's fault. It's just you have to really take a conscious effort to pause and really sit down and say, okay, yeah, I don't need that car. Because if you feel like, okay, I just got a raise, I know I'm doing well. This person had that car for 5 years and I got a raise and I'm doing better than them. I feel I'm doing better than them. I should go get that car. So it is something that you have to stop, pause, and make sure that you're consciously making the right decision. It's not natural to do so.
Yeah, I will say it does make me think back to like how much, for me specifically, I mean, we're all products of our environment and our home and our programming. But like I said, for me, with my parents, in comparison to, so I always feel like the Midwest is always a little bit further behind. So like in LA, like a lot of these conversations are a lot more common. When I was growing up back in the Midwest with my parents, these weren't conversations we were having. Like there were always financial advisors around. For one, they didn't look like us, but it also wasn't as common to do this. And you always kind of we will innately pick up so much from our parents, which in reality, like my parents were born in the 40s, so like their parents were born in the early 1900s. And you think about like how far removed like someone like myself really isn't from something like slavery, and how we're programmed with all of that.
For sure, yeah. That made me think about. I had a conversation with my grandmother, and we were just what was it, like Thanksgiving around 2 years ago, and we were just kind of like writing out just like the family tree, pretty much. And I was just kind of asking her about her upbringing, her grandparents, things of that nature.
Yeah.
And we got to the point in where we hit slavery, and it was like it seems like it's far removed, but essentially my grandmother's either grandmother or great grandmother was actually a slave. So
Wow.
when you really think about it, it's kind
Not
of
that
like
long
that's
ago.
not that long ago.
Right.
So when we think about those those skill sets that they had, the things that they need to survive, um, they're essentially life survival backpack of what I call it. It's significantly different than ours. And certain stuff in their backpack that they had, we don't need anymore.
Right. Right. Right.
There's certain stuff that they had in their bag that we can use, and we use them as well, and they're very helpful to us.
Right.
But then there's certain stuff in their bag that they didn't need to have, but we need to have. So a lot of things, like when we think about just from a generational standpoint and just life and parents, grandparents, great grandparents, um, each one of our parents or each one of the individuals who raised us pretty much gives us their backpack. And it's up to us to be able to kind of break down and say, okay, I don't need this. I don't need this anymore. This tool is still good. I'm still going to use that and create our own backpack. And then go to next generation, next generation, next generation. So when it comes to slavery in that backpack, you can imagine that that backpack is completely different than the backpack that we need now.
Right.
That backpack there was when you get food, you consume it because you don't know when you're going to be able to get food
Right.
again.
Right.
When you get, and that mindset part of that piece goes into the same thing when it comes to today. When we get wealth, it's not food anymore, but when you get money, you consume it.
Because you don't know when you're going to get it
You
again.
don't know when you're going to get it again. You don't know how long you're going to last. YOLO, all those mindsets, all that comes from that backpack. And essentially, what we have to do is kind of figure out.
Real quick, I don't want you to lose your thought. And I would also add to that part of that, because YOLO made me think about that. Part of that is also marketing that happens to us specifically through hip hop and media, which is a whole different conversation. But go ahead.
Yeah, and then this is it's regards to African Americans, it's regards to pretty much everyone. Same thing when it comes to that backpack. We can go all the way that backpack to caveman times,
Okay.
where we didn't have refrigerators, we didn't have, so just naturally as humans as a whole, we're made to consume. So when it comes to all those different things, we've been basically given these things, and we're just going to keep consuming. So it's unnatural to not consume. So when you receive money, it's unnatural to not spend it.
Right.
It's unnatural to not do that. So a lot of that stuff came from slavery in regards to caveman times and just not being able to evolve on a natural path because there were things that caused us to not be able to continuously evolve on a natural space. So in that space, there are a lot of things that we're innately and statistically behind on, but it's not because we're inferior or anything of that nature. It's just because of lack of opportunity, lack of resources, which also come from slavery and like the business of slavery and how we kind of gotten to where we are today in American society.
How, I mean, and this is a big question to ask, but like, how can we start to change that mindset? I mean, I would imagine that comes from knowledge and information, but like, if somebody was listening to this and they wanted to know, they agree with your assessment and they believe that is a huge part of the problem, but they want to know kind of where to start to change that. Like, where do you think that where do you think that evolution begins?
Yeah, and that's where I feel like we have to give ourselves a lot of credit, and I feel like a lot of we don't sometimes. The evolution has already been changing. Wealth is increasing in the Black community. Everything is changing, so things are going in the right direction. The question is, how can we? I guess my question is, how can we speed things up
Okay.
so that way things are a little bit more fair and equitable amongst just everywhere. I feel like that's where essentially where reparations come from, and that's what the need of it's for, is to be able to kind of speed that up from a space that essentially for hundreds of years it was self-created to slow down in the form of slavery.
Right.
So in regards to reparations, I don't think reparations should kind of come in from a normal standpoint of what people think of. Just give everyone 50,000, 200,000, $1 million. Just give everyone that. I feel like reparations should come into a space where we have to look at all the things that aren't equitable in society in regards to like I was saying, financial literacy
Right.
test, and put resources that will push essentially the Black community to subpar across America. So, for example, if um, uh, the Black community is doing 38% on financial literacy tests, the U.S. is doing 57%. There should be an effort to increase that 38% to at least 57%. There
Right.
should be an effort to do that, to bring it up, because when it comes to statistically, it just doesn't make sense. The one's 38, one's 57%. Financially, Scientifically, we know that black people aren't inferior. We
Right.
know there's no lack of one smarter than the other. There just means that there's something in place or something that has happened that has caused one group to not have the same level of knowledge. So resources in regards to reparations should be put towards that to create that. That's one thing that I would say for sure is what should be looked at as far as how to increase that equitable standpoint in regards to in
Mhm.
America.
So, in your opinion, and once again, I don't want to put you too much on the spot, but like, what I don't want to say what because you already said what it looks like. How does that happen? I guess what is somebody enacting that push to make things more equitable look like in actual actions to you?
Yeah. So in actual action, I believe there needs to be. This is above my pay grade, but I believe this needs to be like policies in regards to like politician and government, where government should be utilizing. There should be resources specifically for the Black community to essentially have those gaps filled. Um, and what those programs may look like, maybe special programs in regards to education, in regards to financial literacy in Black communities, resources um, towards those type of programs, and then also just figuring out all the things that aren't equitable in the U.S., looking at them from a statistical standpoint, saying like, okay, this is what it is here, it's what it is here. Where can we pour resources so that way this group can be lifted a little bit more or lifted to the equal playing field around the board. So as far as like what that looks like, I don't know. I know that's going to take like a lot of planning, a lot of the thought
Right.
from governmental leaders to be able to kind of do that. I don't know what that looks like, but what I do think is resources should be going into those spaces where there's clearly a discrepancy between one group versus another group.
Okay.
So, like one thing I would think about in regards to like policymakers and things of that nature, I think it's important to just kind of consider like reparations as like the opposite of what slavery kind of did. And what I mean by that is when we think about slavery, if you go to like a plantation, me and my wife, we went to a plantation in New Orleans, and we were able to kind of just walk around, see the space, see the living quarters of where the um, individuals were housed at, and you can really see that this was like a business.
Right.
And like for me, being a business owner, I just naturally think about the numbers, think about like profit, things of that nature. And I was just kind of looking around, looking at how many people they had in the plantation, how many slaves that were there, what the slaves were doing, what they were creating, what the products they created, what the slave owners sold the products for. And I was just kind of looking and I was comparing it, and it pretty much got close to like a real life comparison.
Okay.
Um, and it would be like the equivalent of um, going to like Chick-fil-A at like 12 o'clock lunch prime
Mhm.
time, and Chick-fil-A is full, it's crowded, everyone's there, and that time frame of a 12 o'clock prime time spot just happening 24/7 around the clock,
Right.
and you don't have to pay any of the workers. So just imagine like a 24/7
Right.
Chick-fil-A nonstop, 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 and you don't have to pay any records. Just think about that business owner, or the
Right.
owner of that Chick-fil-A, how much profit they
Profits.
made.
Right. Right.
Um, and you don't have to pay any managers. You might have to pay like a couple security guards, which are basically the slave plantation watchers,
Right.
essentially. But as far as from a cost to run the business, it was significantly unfair.
The lowest of overheads. Yeah.
Lowest of overhead,
Right.
lowest of overhead, and you're just basically churning profit
Right.
nonstop, nonstop, nonstop. So when we think about those things, we have to think about reparations as the anti of that. The
Okay.
same amount of resources and the same amount of profit that was being made, that has to come from somewhere. There's never You have to have a zero sum game.
Right.
So in a sense, those same things need to be essentially put back into those communities. And when it comes to like government, like individuals at that point in time, they were paying taxes on it. So
Right.
those money that they were making on those profits, the government was making money off
Off
of
of
it as
that.
well.
Right.
So I feel like when it comes to slavery, how much profit was made off of it, and the individual's lineage are still suffering from the backpack that they had to create to survive that, and they're
Hmm.
giving that backpack to their kids, their grandkids, great grandkids.
So on.
It's putting them in a space where there has to be, just as bad as what slavery was, it
Right.
has to be something equally as good
To
to be able to
counterbalance it.
counterbalance that.
Right.
Exactly. So I feel like that's what needs to be done. And a lot of the times when there are lawmakers and things of that nature who present those things, they feel like that's doing too much.
Yes.
Whereas like
Yes.
you have to counterbalance it. It's going to be a lot because
Yeah.
slavery was a lot.
Right.
So no matter what type of reparations come in, there has to be a lot of programs, a lot of things that need to be done to counteract the treachery that was. So so I feel like that's one of the biggest things that doesn't get talked about, is just like how profitable that business operation was for all parties involved except for the workers.
How can that become a larger conversation, you think?
That's a tough one. How does that become a larger conversation? I think that's just something where it just needs to just be continue to be talked about. It can't be brushed under the rug.
Right.
I feel like individuals have to basically continue to put pressure on government to do that. Um, but that's a hard one because of the fact that we're statistically a minority.
Right.
So it's hard to push a big need on a larger group when you're in the minority. But I think the biggest thing is continuously pushing for it, never forgetting it. I feel like that's one of the issues in the schools, is they're
Hmm.
trying to take those things out of the
Right.
school and act like it's never happening. That's what we don't need to do. Is we need
Right.
to continue to put highlight it and continue to push it and make sure that it's known, and that it's never just like trickled away in history and like, oh, that happened this amount of years. I think it just needs to continuously be, the story continuously needs to be told and explained.
I want to put you on the spot, and I'm gonna get us out of here right after that. But
Yeah.
I personally would be interested, and I know it's hard to even do something like this because it's just a summation in your mind. But I would be interested to see like your estimate of those numbers in that, an example of that in like that Chick-fil-A analogy, in the sense of like having spent that time. So just saying like, okay, having spent that time at that plantation, I think that in one day, like somebody doing the research to say, hey, this plantation had this many slaves, they produced whatever this product was. One day, what, like, I can't even say hours because it was pretty much 24 hours, but like, you know,
Mhm.
in a 24-hour period, these slaves produced these many products, which, you know, based on inflation would have been this much money in a day. And then to put that, you know, on a, to scale that up to however long that plantation was in business, I think if something like that was out there, made in like a video and informative format, I think that would be like just a great, like a piece of information to be out there. Not putting it on you, but I'm saying something that would be dope because I had never thought about it like that. And I think just something like that may sow the seed in somebody else's mind, because it's different to just say, hey, I know slavery happened, I know people worked all day, but when you actually put the numbers on it and you see, and then I mean, like I've seen a lot of people that will make through lines and say, hey, these companies that are here today benefited from slavery back then. So then if you could put the dollar amount there and make those connections, I think that kind of helps, even if in a very minuscule way, to start pushing that thing forward.
For sure. Yeah, I agree 100%. And I just looked it up as you were kind of talking. Like, it's not going to be like perfect,
Yeah.
but Chick-fil-A, they make about like $20,000 a day. As
Okay.
far as like a fast food restaurant, that's probably like around the board as far as like a Subway or any other.
Right.
It's roughly probably around like $10,000 to $20,000 a day. So if you think about that from a standpoint, if they're doing that,
And that's not even
um,
24 hours either.
yeah, it's not even 24 hours. So if you're thinking about that, 365 days, um, times what 20. I'm just gonna say 15,000, just to put a number out there. It's about $5.4 million in revenue that, in today's dollar, that they were approximately making
Wow.
a day. I mean, a year. So about 5.4. They probably
And that's just one plantation.
That's one plantation. That's a large. We went to a large plantation, but yeah, that would be like one of the top plantations. Probably we're making around like 5 million
Man.
after expenses. Probably like 3 million, 4 million a year. So
That's crazy.
It's pretty profitable. It was a pretty profitable endeavor on their end, unfortunately, but the treachery that it came with was horrible to the other side. So
Yes.
when you think about that, 3 million a year, compounding year after year after year after year.
And then hundreds of years ago, all the interest and the way they've invested that in other things. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
unfathomable.
Exactly, a number. And then when you think about it now, it's now, how are those communities that were descendants of slaves being affected?
Right.
How are they currently? What's their current state? And we can kind of look at it and see it's not equitable there either.
Right.
And when it comes to how things are essentially kind of repositioned and restructured, essentially now these same corporations are same individuals or same groups, whatever you want to call them, same lineage.
Yes.
They've hit a space where now essentially slavery exists in a sort, but it's different now.
Okay.
And what I mean by it's different is now the way that you can essentially pay someone under minimum wage, essentially pay for someone less than their value, essentially, is if they're incarcerated.
Right.
Essentially.
Right.
So when we think about that, a lot of people don't know, a lot of these companies, a lot of like major companies, pretty much are using a labor force that's incarcerated.
Right.
So like I know Walmart, like they may have shirts that are very, very low cost. And you're like, why are these low cost? Because there are people who are incarcerated who are on a program
Right.
that are able to make $1 or $2 to basically make shirts. And then Walmart pretty much pays that. They
Right.
take those shirts and sell them. And they're able to sell for
And
a
I'm
little profit.
assuming when you say $1 or $2, that's like a day, or is that hourly, or
Maybe hourly.
Okay,
but
still though.
still
Yeah.
very
Compared
a
to
lot lower than the $15
Right.
minimum wage. But yeah, so it's a very low amount that they're being paid, and a lot of those individuals who are in those spaces don't really have family, don't have anyone to put money on their books. So this is the best they have.
Right.
So when you think about that, and you think about just that labor force, that is a form of slavery.
Yeah.
As far as paying them very, very low cost in that space. And then when you think about, I recently learned this is, when you call like a 1-800 number, or you're calling like a AT&T or something like that,
Yeah.
and they say, hey, this is being recorded for quality insurance purposes. A lot of people don't realize some of those individuals that you're talking to are incarcerated.
I never knew that.
Yeah. So a lot of those individuals are working in phone centers in a prison.
I didn't know that existed.
Yeah. So that's business that is being
Yeah.
generated. They don't have to pay them much. They're in a phone center. They're running the business. And now they're making more profit, paying them less expenses. Very similar to slavery.
And that's even outside of it. You start talking about like the school to prison pipelines, and then just how neighborhoods are set up and the disenfranchisement and all of that. But
Yeah.
go ahead.
So yeah, it's a whole. So it's
It's
still
an ecosystem.
Yeah, the reminiscence are still there. So yeah, a lot of those things still exist.
Right.
So we talk about the past, and then now we look at today. We can't. When I say like we have to really, that's what we need to do is fix these core issues. That's what the reparations need to do. Is why statistically there's more. Why statistically are the prison population 30% black, 30% white, when statistically there's significantly less black people in
Right.
America than white people? Why is it the same percentage in jail?
Right.
So you have to think about like, okay, what's systems in place? What's happening to where those percentages are like that? So I feel like that's really where dollars need to go. That's where the anti-slavery dollars, the opposite of slavery dollars, need to
Right.
go to fix those school to prison pipelines, fix all those things, and pretty much essentially adjust for that. Um, so that's essentially where finance kind of comes into big play. Financial literacy is affected by that. All those things play a key factor in the society of America, and then Black America. Another thing I'll say is that situation from a global scale is significantly hurting America.
Okay. Elaborate on
Um,
that.
I was reading an article. I don't remember the percentage, but the fact that Black Americans aren't doing as well is significantly lowering um, the economic value of the U.S. economy
Really?
across the world. So, if Blacks were more equitable,
Do you know where that
I have
was?
to find. I can find that.
Yeah, yeah. Just send
But
it to
yeah,
me. I want to list it or put it up when we record.
but yeah, there's many articles that say like, yeah, if African Americans and Black were put on the same field and had the same levels, it would significantly boost the
They could
economy.
contribute more, which
It
would
would
generate
contribute
more.
more, generate more. So it's actually these systems are hurting everyone as a whole. So it's really rough to see that as like the anti-slavery dollars that would go towards reparations and everything. It's not just in
Could
the
actually
benefit.
help everybody.
It would help the whole entire economy.
Right.
It would make us more stable as a country. It would help a lot. So that's where it's kind of tough to see and different things, and the current systems that are in place obviously benefit um, a certain group.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that group doesn't want
Yeah.
the other
Yeah.
group.
Yeah.
So that's kind of going into like a
Right.
whole different thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it could be, it's an issue for sure.
That but that did, you kind of went on to something I just personally had a question about when you start talking about like global economics. I don't know if I text you this, but I've been curious in the last few months, um, as an American or somebody living in America. What are your thoughts, or should we be concerned about the I guess the BRICS nations and what they're trying to set up economically, and how it may affect like America's economy?
Yeah. And what do you mean like BRICS nation? Kind of if you want to elaborate on that.
I don't know. Oh, where's my phone? But so there's a group of nations. I think it's China, Russia, Brazil, maybe India, maybe South America. I think actually Mexico may have just joined them, and this all may be wrong because I haven't researched this in a few months. But I know they're supposedly creating. They're working together to possibly create their own currency.
Hmm.
And I know it was a big thing maybe last fall that people were really concerned about because they were trying to create their own currency, which then and this may all be wrong, maybe misinformation, but I think they were trying to get, and not that it's going to happen, but they were trying to maybe get that currency to um, back oil or gold or something like that. But it's just either way, you can see that a lot of these countries are trying to organize to create a separate currency and economy to at least compete with America and its dollar.
Makes sense. Yeah. So I know what you're talking about now. So yeah. So essentially, when it comes to like the U.S. dollar is essentially, for the most part, the global currency. When it comes to trade, a lot of trade is done in U.S. dollar terms.
Mhm.
The dollar is pretty much typically, for the most part, the standard globally. Um, and the issue with that is if I don't have a dollar, I constantly am at the beck of call of what my dollar is against the US dollar.
Right.
So when it comes to trade, if I'm trading oil or I'm trading tobacco, whatever the case may be, I don't have to just worry about that this is selling for $20. I have to then worry about it's selling for $20, but then how does it convert to this
To
new
my
to
currency.
my currency? So a lot of these countries, it's frustrating when you have a great harvest, a great season, everything's going right, and then you sell your product, but it's like, oh wait, the dollar, our currency is half of the dollar. So it's a constant thing that a lot of countries have to really worry about. I feel like they're tired of it. And they're in a space where they're like, okay, let's just create our own, and then we don't have to really worry about that. So now
Right.
when I harvest and I harvest 100 pounds of tobacco and I sell it, I don't have to worry about that currency
If I'm going to
piece.
lose something in like the conversion of the currency. Right.
Exactly. So I feel like it's natural for them to want to team up and figure out how to do that. I feel like from a U.S. standpoint, that isn't obviously not in the benefit of the U.S. So I feel like ultimately, when it comes to those spaces, there's going to be a counter in some form of fashion. And when you look at just from a corporate standpoint, you look at like a lot of big businesses and things of that nature, they're usually the last to move. And the reason being is because a lot of times, like these big businesses, they watch, sit back,
Right.
see what everyone's doing, let other companies mess up, let other companies
Make the
test it all
mistakes.
out, make the mistakes. You pay for our research. And then once you figure it out, we're big enough where we'll just hire someone duplicated and that's it. So in regards to that, I feel like that's what the position the US economy is playing. It's like, sure, you guys band together, you guys figure that out, and then once you guys figure it out, we're gonna put our own, and then we're already the currency to go to. So most people are just gonna continuously roll with us. So I feel like that's the play that they're making. Um, I'm not sure, but I feel like that would make sense in the form of the DNA of America and how they move, and the
Right.
DNA of a larger institution, and the bigger pieces and how they would move. So
Okay.
that's what I thought.
Random question. Thoughts on cryptocurrency?
Yeah, I feel like it plays a role in regards to finance and financial spaces. I feel like a lot of individuals abuse it and use it for what it's not intended to be used for, and there's ancillary rewards and ancillary issues that come across with that. So I feel like a crypto, it plays a role. It's still very, very volatile in regards to when you put money into it. You don't know if it's going to go up, go down. So you always want to proceed with caution, especially when you're investing into like a speculative type of investment like that. But I definitely think that it does have a role. I'm not one of those individuals who's like, hey, don't do it. I just think if you're going to be going into it, you want to make sure that from an investment standpoint, your your investment strategy is sound, and you're not
Okay.
just going into it like, I have $100, I'm just going to throw it into there, or I'm just going to be saving into it because I heard it's good. You really want to have a sound investment strategy and build it within inside of your investment strategy.
How, and you may not have an answer to this, but how would one have a sound investment strategy into something as volatile as crypto?
Yeah, I feel like when you like in regards to having that, you want to make sure that you're diversified. So if you have an investment strategy and you're putting $1,000 towards your investment strategy, then what you want to do is figure out, okay, am I aggressive investor? Am I a conservative investor? What's my risk tolerance? Am I okay to put this money in here and leave it in here for 10 years? Am I okay to put this money in here? I'm gonna need it again in 3 months. So
Right.
figuring out your risk tolerance, figuring out how much comfortability you have in regards to the ups and downs. And then from there saying, okay, based upon that, I feel comfortable putting 5%, 10% of my overall investment strategy in crypto.
Okay.
And then from there, you have 5% of your investment strategy in crypto. If it blows up, boom, you made some money. If it doesn't do well, it's only 5% of your overall investment allocation. So it's not going to pretty much like wipe you out.
Right.
So it's really dependent upon the person, how comfortable they are with risk, and then their time horizon as far as when they're going to need the money.
Follow up was separate, but another question. I think I messaged this, but what are your thoughts on trying to figure out how to phrase it, but just like retail investors in the stock market? 'Cause I think I don't know if I sent you the link for the movie, or I don't know if you've seen like Dumb Money. Like I remember,
I
like
saw
I
it.
was
I
one
didn't
of
see it
I
yet.
was one of those stupid people. No, I was like stupid. I was one of those people during the pandemic. I was on Wall Street bets, and it became a whole thing with GameStop and all of that. What are your thoughts? I don't know. Are you familiar with how that played out?
Yeah, I'm familiar. I didn't watch the movie,
Oh
so
yeah,
I'm
I mean
familiar,
the
like in
movie
real
is
time.
well, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, in real time. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on? Because like I do feel that was one of the few times that we got to actually see the power of the people is kind of like a David and Goliath thing. And I mean, at the end of the day, the stock market's still going to win. But like, what are your thoughts on people that take that type of approach to the stock market? I mean, if let's say in that pie, the 60-20-20, this 20% is coming out of their fund.
Hmm.
If that is the case, what are your, or just in general, what are your thoughts on those type of investors or that situation and scenario from any angle?
Yeah. My first thoughts are it's dangerous on that space.
Yeah.
Um, it's very dangerous, and the reason being is because I don't. I guess first I don't want to pin it versus like Wall Street or investments versus individuals, just because Wall Street represents a lot of individuals. Like for
Okay.
example, when you have a 401k,
Hmm.
your 401k is invested in the stock market. Most people, when they invest in a 401k through their job, they don't want to deal with it. They don't want to deal with the administration. So what they do is they give their money, put in their 401k, they put into like a target date fund, some ETF, some mutual fund of some sort. So the majority of people who are saving for retirement are investing into the stock market, and that money that's being invested by them are being managed by Wall Street. So when you're when you have a 401k and you're investing in that stand front, and then you have, I guess, like the meme stock side of things, if you have a 401k, you're pretty much betting against yourself when you're doing the meme stocks,
Okay.
because
Right.
one side is the the Wall Street side is your 401k that does well, you're going to do well, and then if you're doing meme stocks, you're basically hurting, kind of canceling
Yeah.
yourself out. Um, so that's one thing to kind of just think about it in that stand front is Wall Street is just the individuals that manage the large bulk
Of wealth.
of wealth and investments. So the biggest thing is like the individuals who aren't comfortable with how Wall Street is basically managing their investments, how Wall Street is basically taking care of these things. That's something where you want to tweak it on the investment level on the 401ks and what you're investing into there.
Okay. How
Um,
would one do that?
so one would do that in regards to like their allocation.
Hmm.
So looking at like what they're investing in their 401k, firstly. So just looking at that, looking at how you're set up, where you're invested, how much is going into where, what you're doing, and looking at it there. And then from there, figuring out, okay, am I okay with this money manager, or am I okay with BlackRock? I have my money in the ETF BlackRock
I
funds.
got so much on, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's a whole different thing. But yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have my money in a Fidelity fund. I have my money in a Vanguard fund. All those companies, what happens is you have, whenever you're investing in a company, you have voting rights. So if you invest into like a stock of Apple, you vote for their board.
Hmm.
When you invest into your 401k, you invest into an ETF, which is basically a basket of investments that then pretty much picks the investments that they invest into. So your money that you put into your 401k then gets put into a pool. That pool then buys the investments.
Right.
Um, but essentially, you're buying a percentage of the investments, but you don't have any of the rights to the voting. So what you're doing is you're relinquishing up your rights to the big conglomerate, which is like the ETF manager, which is like a Vanguard, Fidelity,
Right.
BlackRock, and things like that nature. So to from a nuanced standpoint, from an individual person, it's really hard for an individual person to make moves just because you're just one.
Right.
But from a larger scale, it's really figuring out from a societal standpoint is BlackRock utilizing your votes to basically do what's in the best interest for the large group of the people who are investing in that ETF. So that's the biggest thing is one would say, hey, I don't think they're doing the best. I want to pull my vote from there, from that company, invest into a different fund of that nature. Again, that's something that kind of comes to the political side where it's like the same thing when we think about politics, like does my vote even really count type of
Right.
thing
Right.
from
Right.
there. So it's more of like the mass numbers game in that space, and just understanding where you stand in your position. I think that's the number one thing is when it comes to just the masses, it's going to be hard for one person to change a lot of things. But if a lot of people understand their position, then they'll make moves differently. So I think the biggest thing is kind of coming back to it is being like financially literate of where your money's going, how it's being worked, how it's being managed, knowing what game the financial game is, and just understanding that. And then when you understand that, the masses will move differently, and then that will affect how things will play out and work.
All right, I got one more question because since you kind of brought them up. So in the sense of like, I totally understand what you're saying about like, um, the way people were approaching like meme stocks could be betting against yourself when it comes to like a 401k. Thoughts on BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street in the sense of how, I mean, one, they almost own everything, but in the sense of like, especially when you're somewhere here like LA post pandemic, how they're buying up all the property. What are your thoughts on them in that sense? Because like for somebody like me, I'm not working for a corporation. I'm not invested in a 401k like that. But if I were, I would feel a way if I wasn't a homeowner and this company is buying up all the property and kind of raising like gouging the prices, raising the value or the rent price to where it's almost an artificial inflation and it's an artificial scarcity of homes. Like, what are your thoughts on? I guess maybe not even so much the company. You can speak on that if you want, but like the growing sentiment towards those companies and some of the actions they've been taking as of late. Whether it's those companies, this isn't necessarily the same, but like for example, how people have been upset with like Kellogg's. They're like, "I'll start eating cereal for dinner." It just seems to be like if you're talking about a fiduciary responsibility, like I get why BlackRock would do what they're doing, but to just a normal person, it seems like there's a very big disconnect, and there's a growing sentiment along the lines of that disconnect. So I'm just curious, like, what your take on all that is.
Yeah, it's tough. It's like one of the I don't want to sound like insensitive or anything like that, but one of the biggest things you just hear like in a lot of spaces like that is like don't hate the player, hate the game. On that
Yeah,
end,
yeah,
so
yeah.
it's tough because naturally, if you're on the team of BlackRock and you're investing in a BlackRock fund and they're doing these things and you're profiting off of it, if you're sitting in that seat, you're gonna be like, yes, I'm winning. My account's up.
Hmm.
They invest into this fund. I invest into this fund. I'm doing great. My 401k is doing wonderful. You're happy if you're in that seat.
Right.
If you're not in that seat, you're not happy. So there's going to be two competing interests where one group is going to be very, very happy. Another group is going to feel like it's not fair and it's not right.
Hmm.
And really, what comes into the place is in the middle is in regards to government determining, is that fair? Is that
I
just?
was going to go there, but
Is
keep
that
going though.
right? And as a whole, us voting on saying, hey, that's not right. People aren't able to buy houses anymore. There should be legislation in place that prevents that. So as long as it's allowed, it's one of those things where if they don't do it, someone else is going to do it. And if someone else is going to do it, that weakens their position as their company. So they kind of have to do it because
Mhm.
otherwise, if they don't, then someone else is going to do it, and they're going to. So it's really in the space where we have to really rely on government to say that that's not right and prevent anyone from doing it.
Is there ever a point, and there's a few things, but like, is there ever a point one where a company like that gets too big? Because I think about like for myself, like I'm a huge Apple person, and we're kind of getting to the point where they're getting into some antitrust things, and I get it. But I don't. When you were absolutely much more informed on all of this, but especially like BlackRock and all that. But when you see how much they're invested in, how much they own, even some of our biggest defense contractors. Some would ask, do they own too much or have too much influence for the government to even come in and make a policy to stop them? I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with that, but like that is something that I think about when I hear that. But I do get I can't help but laugh at the don't hate the player, hate the game part because that is true. And if they don't do it, somebody else will do it. But I do wonder if they're so ingrained in everything that we do as a country that they may have positioned themselves to where nobody's really going to be able to stop them. That's just a curiosity or a thought that I have.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to whenever there's someone who's benefiting, that means someone's not benefiting. So, and someone who's benefiting in the government, is there someone in the government who's also not benefiting?
Right.
So those individuals who are in the government that aren't benefiting are going to basically want that to be stopped. So that's where it comes into this yin and yang, because
Okay.
essentially, like when I was saying like zero sum game, if someone loses, someone wins, that means someone lost.
Right.
Especially when investments. When you make profit on your investment, that means someone lost profit on their investment.
Right.
So you can't make all these funds. There's someone who's losing
Right.
on that space. So that group that's losing is a large group. So when it comes to them feeling like or seeming that they're too big to basically for them to be stopped, there's a lot of individuals who aren't happy about it.
Right.
So because there's a lot of individuals that aren't happy about it, yes, those defense contractors, those other individuals are happy about it, but there's large groups and large companies on the opposite ends who aren't benefiting from this.
Right.
A lot of real estate companies that have been around for a long period of time. It's like, this is what we've been doing. This is how we build our profit. Now you're stepping on our toes and now going
Right.
into this space. They're not happy about that. So there's going to be a counter group that's going to push back on that. So yes, they have a lot of people on their side, but then there's a lot of people who are against their side too. So I feel like with those battles that happen, ultimately everything kind of comes into the wash, and ultimately fairness is created because it can't be a significant side of one side just completely
Right.
taking over
So
the other.
basically, the market will correct itself if and when it needs to in that scenario.
Yeah, in that scenario.
Okay.
That's what it's built off of, and that's what I would hope for.
Right. Right.
I mean, sometimes it takes a long time for things like that to happen, so it may not happen immediately. But that's what I would hope, and that's systematically how things are supposed to be set up in that space. Where if there's a good enough amount of individuals, people statistically that are pushing against it, then they're going to have to be a middle ground that comes to that.
Well, you didn't ask for this part, but I want you to tell anybody out there listening a little bit more about Black Lions Financial and what you do.
Yeah, so Black Lions Financial, we essentially are, again, like a fiduciary financial advisory firm. What we do is we're the person you come to when you have questions about your own finances specifically. So what that would mean is if you're having a question like, what should my investment strategy should be? Sitting down, we walk you through, figure out your goals and your risk tolerance, and then help you build out your investment strategy. If you're like, how much should I be saving? We look and figure out how much your expenses are. We review your budget. Are you spending too much here? Here's some things you might want to tweak. Here's some things you want to adjust. And then from there, we kind of build that out. So um, we help with a lot of different things. So it's kind of hard to boil it down
Yeah.
into a few things. But I would say ultimately we're like you're very similar to having like an attorney, where you're attorney for your finances. So where you're the person you go to for questions, you need help. We answer any questions you have, and then we point out areas and spaces where you can improve on, things that you should tweak, and it's all in alignment to your goals and your vision. So it's not going to be anything that's like cookie cutter, like, hey, you should save 5%, 10%. There's general rules that you should have. But what we do is we really tailor made a financial plan and a financial roadmap and a financial game plan for you to follow, for you to do exactly what you want to do, whatever that is. So
Okay.
that's essentially what we do. And we take a lot of pride on it in regards to we don't have any like proprietary products. So, for example, a lot of the bigger financial firms, they'll have a proprietary product where their goal is to sell you their product at the end of the day.
Okay.
Where our goal is we charge a fee. Once we have our fee, then we don't really have skin in the game. Our goal is just to help you get to your goals
Goal.
and
Right.
and do what you want to do. So that's one thing we pride ourselves a lot on is being able to essentially get you to where you want to get to without having any really biases on how you get there, and really just making sure that you're getting there from a sound financial strategy. Push back on things that may seem off, give you pushback, and just having like feedback to have someone you can talk to, having a conversation and dialogue around your finances, and know that you're getting it from an expert or someone who knows the field and know what's going on as well. So that's a little bit about Black Lines in that space.
Okay. Before we sign off, is there anything else you want to share? Anything else?
Anything else that I want to share? Just yeah, education is key. Financial literacy is key. So just knowing what you're doing, reading, understanding kind of what's going on from a high level, knowing about your savings accounts, your banking, and just try to learn a little bit about more about finance every single day. Whether it's um, learning about your savings account, just constantly being a student of finance, because no matter who you are, what you are, where you are, finance affects you in some form or fashion. It's one of those things that pretty much interweaves within every single field, every single space. So it's something that I feel like everyone should be learning a little bit more about it every single day. Just educating yourself, because the more you know, the more you can do, and the more financial power you'll have in the long term.
All right. Forgot to ask, what's your website or how do they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so contact wise, website is Black Lines Financial. Lines is with a S, Lines. Financial, Instagram, it could be Black Lines
Is it
Financial.
.com?
BlackLinesFinancial.com,
Okay.
yes. Instagram at Black Lines Financial. Um, and yeah, that's how you guys can get in contact with us. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to go to the website. Feel free to follow us on Instagram. Reach out from there.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. And I have a feeling people will see more of us later on something else, but we'll get to that
We'll
soon enough.
definitely
But
get to that
I
for sure.
appreciate you.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you,
All
sir.
right.
All right.